Hey, hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Chastity. Here we talk about beauty, entertainment, celebrities, books, movies, animes, and kind of anything else that garners my attention this week. And today we're going to delve into the Amazon Prime original show Them and the topic of Black trauma films. So a few weeks ago, the trailer for the Amazon Prime show Them was floating around Twitter. I had watched the trailer. When I watched the trailer, I immediately saw the parallels to Jordan Peele's work, at least in his movies. I can definitely see that whoever was behind the show probably pitched, I can make you a Get Out. I can make you a Lovecraft Country. I feel like that was definitely like in the words used in the boardroom to make this show. And almost immediately after the trailer had dropped, I had definitely seen people talking about how this was going to be like a black trauma show, that like black people were going to suffer throughout the show. Now, I'm the type of person where it's like I like to see it from my own eyes. I wasn't going to prejudge this show based off the trailer. Trailers can be very deceiving in good ways and in bad ways. I decided that when the show came out that I was going to give it a shot. Fast forward to Friday, April 9th, the show drops on Amazon Prime. I attempt to watch it. I'm going to sit here today and say that I did not finish the show because I couldn't. I simply, like the last couple episodes, I kind of just skipped through them. I didn't really sit and watch. I'm not the type of person that I'm not going to force myself to take in content that makes me deeply uncomfortable, that triggers me. And as someone that's dealt with multiple things, this show hit on a lot of stuff that I am not comfortable watching. And quite honestly, I was just gonna leave it at that, just a show I simply couldn't watch. But then that Saturday, the New York Times review of the show had came out, and it was all over Twitter. I'm talking about once that review came out, Lena Waithe's name was trending everywhere. If you do not know, Lena Waithe is an executive producer of the show. Completely unfair that Lena Waithe is getting the brunt of the dragging when this show is Little Martin's creation. It's this black man in that room full of white people. This is what they created. So I do think it's very unfair that she's the only one getting dragged, even though, when it comes to Lena Waithe, after Queen and Slim, y'all want to drag her, I'm completely for it. But I do believe it's unfair that she's the only one, getting any blowback from that. But I am also aware that she is the most recognizable name attached to this show. Because I had no clue who Little Martin was. Like, the name, there's no face to kind of go with it. So in this review, the main reason that Lena Waithe in this show is getting dragged is they describe what happened in a couple of episodes. I'm just gonna say trigger warning for sexual assault and murder. This is very graphic, what I'm going to say next. So in the article, they detail three separate episodes. One episode in which there is a character who is brutally raped and her child, an infant, is then murdered. In another episode, two black people's eyes are poked out and then they are set on fire. This type of gruesome violence is throughout the entire show. There truly is not a moment of reprieve for any of the black people in this show. Along with that, the terrible choices of music to try to give the black people power, but it really don't give what it thinks it's giving. Now, before we really get into this, I think it's very important that we dissect what makes a black trauma film versus a movie that black people are just simply going through things like you're supposed to in movies. Like, I feel like a lot of times movies that are not black trauma films just get labeled as that because the black main characters are seemingly going through things, and I'm just like, this is a plot. The characters are supposed to go through trials and tribulations and need to like overcome things. That's how writing works. That is how we write. So I do feel like a lot of times films do get put in the black trauma category unfairly. Now Them belongs there, and we'll get into it belongs. But I feel like the main difference between a film with just black people existing and things happening with the progression of the plot and black trauma films is, in black trauma films, these characters are their trauma. We don't know anything really about them besides the fact that they're suffering. Their personalities is their pain. Their personalities are their hardships. They are these things. When you think of these characters, you think of the terrible things happening to them and not them as a person. These characters are not, they don't feel real. They are not well flushed out. They are just things that horrible things are happening to. They don't feel real to you. They don't feel real to an audience. They are just A and B personality types who are going through horrible and traumatic things. That is, I feel like, the biggest difference between black trauma films and films where black people are just going through things. These characters are not self-actualized. They're not real. They don't feel real. Again, they're characters, but they're supposed to feel real to us, the audience. How are we supposed to feel bad and feel with them if we don't view them as real people? And that is the biggest hurdle for black trauma films. They can't make these black characters be real people. Okay, their blackness is all stereotypical or explained. That's the biggest issue, is explaining blackness. When you're supposed to have a black audience, you don't gotta explain nothing to me. It is the tiny nuances that make these black characters real. Because why are we watching black shows and black people are going to bed with no bonnets or scarves on? Something simple as that. No silk pillowcase, nothing. Nothing like that. To make these black characters feel real. And here is where them really fall short. These black characters are not real. They are their trauma. We have the mother Lucky, who the entire show is carried on the back of her trauma. She was assaulted and her child murdered, and that is it. That is the vehicle for this show. Her trauma. Every single character, the vehicle for them is their trauma, and that's it. I don't really know these characters outside of the horrible things that have been done upon them. And that's not real character. That's what makes this just trauma. Because it's horrible things on top of horrible things, and nothing is well flushed out. That is another huge issue in this show. You're kind of just watching it, and you're watching these characters suffer, and you're waiting for something to happen. It's just like thinly veiled plot points, just slightly strung together, but nothing really concrete that connects one scene to the next scene and this character to this character. It's all the bare bones of a script. And just the bare bones of storytelling without interconnecting anything that's important to each other. But what is interconnected is the pain and suffering of every black person in the show. They are suffering in this show, and we get nothing out of it. Just suffrage on top of suffrage on top of suffrage. And I think an important point to not forget about these shows and these movies is that their intended audience is not black people. Let's be fair and let's be honest here. With the way they spoon feed blackness into some of these shows and movies, how they explain the black experience to people who live it, we know these shows and movies are not for us. Not really. They're for the white audiences. And that is, I think that's what makes it worse, is to kind of show white people that, hey, black people deserve to live. You show them the most gruesome and graphic death of these black characters to kind of shock white people into being like, this is what has happened to black people. Are you not disgusted with yourselves? And it doesn't quite do what they think it does. Because while you are making this to shock white people, you are traumatizing a lot of your black audience. Especially when you think about the fact that we live in a society where going on Twitter, going to turn on the news, you can see a black person get murdered. Do we not forget, like 2016 was a year where no matter where you looked, you saw another black person being murdered. There was videos floating around the internet. They were being played on the news. Black death was front and center, especially in 2016. It's always been front and center. I feel like if we live in a society that it's so easy to see a real black person, not a character in a movie, not someone in a book, but a real life black person, like you and me, body laid out on the street, we don't really need this graphic media in film and television when it is literally embedded in society. Again, because I have to bring up 2016 because 2016, it was every 3 to 5 business days there was another video of another black person being murdered. It felt almost normal. It was weird when we didn't have a long stretch of time without seeing a black person get murdered. A society that black death is so tangible and so easily consumed, we don't need it in other forms of television and other forms of media to be so gruesome and so graphic when the reality of it is on Twitter. The reality of it is getting played on CNN every hour on the hour. Now, with this new iteration of black horror movies, we can tell that they're all very heavily inspired by Jordan Peele. He's done it the best so far of anyone who's making black horror right now. He does a really good job of keeping it very black and keeping in the theme of horror. And we've now seen a lot of poor imitations of that movie. And I feel like a lot of these writers and directors lack the talent of Jordan Peele and his team. Because Jordan Peele doesn't write all of these movies. I don't think he wrote Us, or he didn't direct Us. Something around that lines. He doesn't do everything himself. So Jordan Peele and the people he worked with have done a phenomenal job creating good black horror movies. And now that is the hot popular thing, so people are trying to remake it, recapture the magic, and they lack the talent, they lack the skill. So in order to kind of, I guess, glaze over that, they have just pumped up the violence and the gore to be shocking. Because if you notice in Jordan Peele's Us and Get Out, I'm not going to talk about what he's done with Twilight Zone because I've not personally seen that. But with his movies, the black characters, there's violence in these movies. Now, Get Out is very tame when it comes to violence. But even the most gruesome in Get Out, is not done to its black characters. You know, if you've seen Get Out, you've seen Get Out, and you know that the white family pretty much get the brunt of the violence than our black main character. Same as with Us. There's plenty of violence in Us, and there's violence done towards black people, but that violence is not nearly as gruesome as what is happening to the white people in this movie. You notice a pattern here that you can do violence onto black people, but it's the gruesomeness of it that is not necessary. And I feel like as a whole, because I am personally a lover of horror, good horror movies and bad horror movies alike, it doesn't really matter. I love horror movies, good or bad, I take it all. I love horror movies. And I personally feel like horror movies are at their best when they are not overly gruesome, overly violent. The best part of horror is the psychological part. It is making you feel the anxiety, the fear. Your heart is beating fast. The adrenaline is pumping through your veins as a viewer. That is what hooks you to a horror movie. And I feel like when writers and directors are not, I don't want to say not talented, but they don't know how to convey that, they then rely on jump scares, they rely on gore, they rely on violence to kind of like force feed you those emotions instead of you just naturally feeling anxious. Because my favorite part of watching a horror movie is like when my heart is beating so loud I can hear it in my own ears. I feel anxious. That is what makes horror movies so good. And when you kind of bastardize it with just, here's a bunch of violence, here's a bunch of gore, because you can't make me feel those things. You have to show me those things to make me feel it. Because honestly, Nothing is more terrifying than what you can imagine yourself. It is the 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 camera panning away, but you can still hear the sounds. You hear the screams, you hear it all. So you're left to imagine what could possibly be happening on the other side of the screen, and that is thrilling and that is amazing. And I just, with these black trauma films, they seem to not know how to make black people feel. And so we're going to give you violence to make you feel the things you're supposed to naturally feel. Because we can't make you feel those things ourselves. You get what I'm saying? It definitely feels like a lot of writers and directors are sacrificing, storytelling to be provocative, to be shocking, to show you how dark we can make this show, how gritty we can make something. And again, I want to say this, that I am not a person who believes we should get rid of slave movies. I feel like the conversation around black trauma films is usually the for black slave movies and against slave movies people. And I'm a person who's right in the middle. I feel like slave movies have their place and they are necessary. Now, I wish we would tell more stories of more people. Like, that there's definitely, like, remember that whole weird debate on, like, black queer people's, like, during slavery, like, their queerness came second and no one was really, like, queer during slavery because they had more important things to think about, which is 100% not true if you just do a little bit of research. Like, telling those type of stories will be important because all the misinformation you guys have. We just give a broader spectrum of slave movies. I think people would probably have less of an issue with them, as well as just having regular ass movies with black people in them. Just like, we still have the same, like, we want, I think, like, I love, like, I like horror, so I do like we're getting black horror movies again. Wish they were less traumatizing, but as well, like, I want black vampires. I want black, you know, magicians and witches and warlocks. Like, I want to step into the fantasy realm and there be fully black movies. I think we need more black people in fucking space. Like, there's so much in these other genres that we're not really a part of, except for maybe a token black person here or there, that I do think we need to have, like, full black cast in these movies, as well as still have our slave movies and still have the historical pieces, because they have their place. So I don't believe that those movies should go away, but we do need a fair balance. When there is no fair balance and you're just watching black people get murdered and tortured every movie, it gets a little much. It does when you live life as a black person and you live with these anxieties already. So the intended purpose of these, like, black trauma films are in order to shock white audiences and to show them what racism looks like, yada yada yada. But the thing is, in 2021, racism does not look like how it did in 1950. Racism has gotten a rebrand because as society has moved forward, it is deemed bad to be openly racist. Listen to my words here. To be openly racist, it is not lucrative for you to be a bigot. To publicly say you hate black people and you wish black people would all fucking die. You can't say that. Well, you could, but for monetary reasons, to be able to work in this society, being openly racist is frowned upon. And because that racism has gotten a rebrand, racism does not look like how it did back in the day. Now, I'm no way, shape, or form saying that racism like how it used to be still does not exist, because that would be a lie. Black people to this day are still being lynched. Black people are being murdered all of the time. So I am not saying that type of violence does not exist. But as your average everyday black person does not deal with racism in the way that we used to and when our grandparents were growing up, right? Now it's microaggressions. It's being told you speak well. It's being told you're not like other black people. It's changed. It's not as overt as it used to be. It's definitely more covert. When you're working in office spaces, your white employees tell you they like your hair better when it's straight versus when it's curled. It's things like that. Racism has changed, right? It's not The definition has changed. Everything we once knew about racism doesn't quite fit in the society we live in now because it's deemed bad to be openly racist. Again, to be openly racist. You can be racist, but as long as you keep it hush hush, you know, it's in the small jabs, the little digs. You know, not going around calling people the N word, though people still do that. But as we can see on the internet, at least, people get held to task. How many people have lost their jobs? How many people have been found out? Like, there is consequences, not really, but slightly, for people who are openly racist. So it's not lucrative to be openly racist. Again, racism has changed, and I feel like because those movies create this idea that that's what not slavery, that's what racism looks like when it comes to everyday life, that's when they really don't speak up because they're like, well, no one's burning crosses on your front door. You're not being dragged out your house and beaten. How bad can it really be for black people? And it's like, that's what these movies are doing. They're being like, well, it doesn't look like that, so therefore it's not bad. And it is bad. The microaggressions, the stopping people from working at places because they're natural hair, all of that is actually a real big issue. Again, racism has just simply changed to fit the society in which we live in today. Because how it used to be does not fit in this society. Racism has just changed. It still very much so exists. It just moves in a different way. And I want to state this, that I desperately do want a surge of black horror movies. Like, I really, really do. I love horror movies, and I would love to see more black people in them. But if they're going to be like this, I don't want them. I simply don't. I am not trying to watch black people who are poorly fleshed out. Just be traumatized for an hour and 45 minutes. I feel like a really good example of a good black horror movie is His House. Immigrant couple that leaves their country in Africa because of war. They travel through a boat to get to London. They are given, asylum, and they're haunted by ghosts and spirits from their country. Right? Because one, I love that movie because I got to learn a little bit something about African culture and their folklore. Because every country has its own, like, ghosts and demons and stuff like that. As someone who's Caribbean, like, we have our own. So it's like, it was really nice to see the parallels between, my culture and this specific country in Africa and how their ghosts work, stuff like that. And this movie, they were haunted, okay? Them ghosts, active. Ain't give nobody a break. But it was all psychological at first. Like, there would be scenes where I'm like, am I going crazy? Like, is it me? And they got you psychologically. And then there is violence, especially towards the end of the movie. But it's not black trauma film. It is well done horror. Because these characters are people. They are well flushed out individuals. They make you feel things for them. And then we got the violence. That's how you're supposed to do it. Give me something tangible. Give me these characters. Don't just give me violence. And that's what I'm getting from a lot of these black films, is just pure violence. Violence for violence sakes, with no storytelling and interweaving of it all. Just, sometimes black people just go through shit. Like, cool. Can I get something? No, not a thing. Just more violence. Cool. I really appreciate that. Like, I really, really do. That's pretty much it. I just really needed to get this off my chest because that show really bothered me. Like, it was so hard for me to watch. Like, I don't want to say I'm traumatized, but also, like, I don't feel good as a person after watching that. It was so gruesome and so gory, and for what? Lena Waithe, Little Martin, white people in that room, none of y'all seen the pearly gates for that shit. That was actually the most painful thing I've ever watched. And I'm so happy that the next day I was able to watch Concrete Cowboy, because that was a nice palate cleanse. Also, Concrete Cowboy, I fear the best movie of 2021. Yeah, I said it. Y'all gonna have to come hard for us this year because I don't quite think the rest of you girls could top that. What an amazing fucking movie. If you've not seen Concrete Cowboy, please do watch it. But yeah, Little Martin, Lena Waithe, because anyway, you keep attaching your name to this shit. Because don't think I forgot about that travesty that was Queen and Slim. What a terrible, an abysmal movie. I remember, like, I saw it in theaters, right? And when the movie was over, first of all, people walked out before the credits even turned on. And so we all walked out together. This room full of people who do not know each other. And we all went, what the fuck was that? What in God's name was this movie? So Lena, listen, that's why I have no faith in Lena Waithe. When she put her name on some shit, it's always some goddamn bullshit. Lil Martin, I don't know who you are, but I don't like you. I simply hate you. I have no clue who you are. I couldn't pick you out in the lineup, but just know I don't fuck with you. Because you sat here and you pitched this, and then you wrote it, and then you directed it, and then you gave it to black people to see. And again, I have no problem with hearing about my history, but there is a time and there is a place and there's storytelling. It's just the things you learned in school on how to tell a decent story, you've all thrown it away for violence and gore. And it's really disgusting. Listen, I'm done. I'm done ranting. I've been sitting in front of this camera for God knows who long. I'm done. I'm finished. I'm going to go to my happy place. I'm going to watch some anime. Go order some 30 burgers. I'm going to live my happy black life. Okay. If you want to, like, hit me up on any of my social medias, links to that will all be in the description box below. If you want to, like, maybe throw any, like, video ideas my way. Because sometimes I don't see all my comments because sometimes they just don't show up on, like, the creator app. So the best way to really, like, get in contact with me is through my Instagram or my Twitter. I'm usually always there. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye, guys.